Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Living on the Verge podcast, where we talk all things pop culture, reality TV, and food and travel. My name is Virginia, and I thank you for joining me for another episode. If you like what you hear, please make sure to follow and subscribe, rate and review, and especially tell a friend. Now, let's get started. Hello, everybody. It's me, Virginia. Welcome back to the Living on the Verge podcast. Thanks for joining me for another episode. This is part two of a two-part series covering my weekend in WeHo. So if you haven't listened to part one, I suggest you go back and listen. We talked about things like the fact that Peter Madrigal and I had very awkward moments. We talked a little bit about the new Vanderpump Rules cast. We talked about the fact that Tom Schwartz may or may not have been flirting with me. So it was a fun listen. Go back and listen if you haven't yet. And if you have, thank you for listening. And while we're at it, a little bit of housekeeping. So in part one of the podcast, I realized that I had been referring to my friends Sarah and Holly's podcast as the Vanderpump Party Rules podcast. And so apparently I'm a little dyslexic. I know that it's the Vanderpump Rules Party podcast. So for those of you who may have been confused, one more time, Vanderpump Rules Party podcast. Thankfully, I did tag them correctly. So, ladies, that just means that people are listening because they were looking for your podcast after having listened to mine. So that's the good news. The bad news is I may be a little bit dyslexic, but that's okay. And we are getting some comments and some stars. So my 5-star shout outs this week go to Gigi, Timu Jim, and Roxanne. Thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. And also, I'd like to thank new listeners in Houston, Oregon, and Minnesota. Welcome aboard, guys. So I will get started with part two of my weekend in WeHo, which essentially covers the rest of Saturday night and my dinner on Sunday evening with David Yontef of Behind the Velvet Rope podcast. So where we left off on part one was I had just gotten back in an Uber to go back to my hotel from Chiconi's. And the hotel that I was staying at is the Godfrey Hotel. And I didn't say it yesterday because it has its own story. This is the hotel where if you go back during this last season of Beverly Hills Housewives, you'll see that it's the hotel that Sutton had her fashion show just recently around the pool. And this is where Kathy did the infamous, walking the runway ahead of the models in the fashion show. So I got to stay at that hotel and I went up to the rooftop. I'll tell you about that a little bit later. I also remember David telling me that Cynthia Bailey had just stayed here. And in fact, that is where she normally stays when she's in town. So that's interesting and fun and juicy. I didn't see her. She was obviously not in town, and she happens to be in Atlanta at the moment. I had noticed when I checked in that there was a cute little case with the name Godfrey Hotel on it, and it had a set of earplugs, like foam earplugs. And I didn't think too much of it, but it did make me wonder. And then I thought, well, I'm on the corner of a busy street. Maybe they're just being super considerate. Okay, so I get back from dinner and my day out with the gals and head up to my hotel, but I hear music. So instead of going to my floor, I go to the rooftop and as soon as the doors open, you can hear blaring salsa music. There's a crazy vibe. It's, a really nice evening out, and there's a lot of people up there. So I go up and I see this huge bouncer. Guy must have been 7 feet. I'm not kidding. And he points to the gal and says, "You got to check in with her." So I do. And she asked me for $15. I told her, "Well, I really just kind of want to see what's up here." And she said, "You can't do that unless you give me $15." And I said, "Okay, well, thank you." And she said, "Wait a second, are you staying at the hotel?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "Oh, well, you can get in free. You just need a wristband. So why don't you go downstairs and grab a wristband and then come on back up?" And I asked what was going on. And she said that on one corner, they were doing bachata lessons. And then on another end, they were doing salsa lessons, and they were going to do that until about 11 o'clock. And then they opened it up for open dancing until 2 a.m. So that sounded like really a lot of fun. And I thought, okay, cool. I'll be right back. I'm going to go get my wristband. So I jump back in the elevator, I head back down, go to the front desk, ask them for a wristband. No problem. They asked me how many I wanted. I asked for one. Kind of made me realize that I could have had the girls come back with me and we could have done that, but that's neither here nor there. I grabbed my wristband, got into the elevator, pressed the button for my floor, and went back to my room. What the hell, you guys? My plan was to go back to my room, put on some comfy shoes, have a cup of tea, and then head upstairs, have a nightcap, do some people watching, come back to my room after listening to some music. Well, I got in my room and I realized why I had the earplugs. It was jumping. The sound was loud and clear coming down, and I was not the next floor down from the rooftop. So that just meant that they were pumping their music for God and everybody in WeHo to hear, and I was going to hear it all night too. I took off my shoes, I put on some sweats, I started looking through the pictures from, the day, and turned on the TV. I was watching The Residents. Is anybody watching that on Netflix? It's a limited series with Uba. Listen, it's really good. I think it's clever. If you haven't seen it, you may want to do it. Anyway, I was tired and kind of just feeling like chilling. And so that's what I did. I watched a couple of episodes and then I just went to bed. So takeaway, if you're looking for a quiet place, the Godfrey's not it. If you're looking for cool salsa and bachata dance lessons and dancing till the wee hours, then the Godfrey Hotel is your spot. At the time, my frustration was that I was too tired to go back up there, but I had read that the rooftop was closed on Sunday and Monday. So that meant that if I didn't go up there, I wasn't going to get to see the rooftop. And that was part of the reason that I stayed there. David doesn't drive, so the plan was he was going to walk over to the hotel. We'd catch an Uber to dinner and we'd take it from there. So anyway, wake up Sunday morning and I realize that I'm just really tired and I'm still thinking I have a couple of episodes left of The Residents. So what a good morning to just chill. And essentially, you guys, that's what I did. I went downstairs. They had a breakfast buffet, but I had already missed that, and that's okay because I'm not all that great about, very excited about breakfast buffets anyway. But I did order off of the menu. I had a nice hot tea, and I had these charred tacos that were actually delicious. So if ever at the Godfrey and you're wondering what to order for breakfast, the charred tacos are really good. I had three of them. I was only able to get through like one and a half of them. Tasty. They had bacon, eggs, potatoes, I believe cotija cheese, some peppers, and they were served in on little hand-sized flour tortillas. They were yummy and they were better than just like a bacon and egg breakfast. So the place was a cute place to people watch. You could sit down there. It's kind of situated on the corner so you could see people walking by. I finished my breakfast and I was getting ready to head back up to the room and decided I would take a little walk around the block. As I was walking around the block, I saw another group of people doing some sort of photo shoot. This time I did not approach or ask to be in the photo shoot. I just kept on walking. And when I got back in the elevator, something in me said, well, let's just go see if we could get to the rooftop. So I hit the elevator button for the rooftop, and lo and behold, it was open. There was just nothing going on up there, but the pool area was open. So if you want to see what that place looks like when it's not all decked out for a fashion show, I'll post some pictures on my Instagram. I was surprised. It was much smaller than it looked. In fact, I still haven't taken the time to do this, but I'm going to go back to that episode because I can't even really figure out how they set it up the way they did because the entire pool is surrounded by this glass that really gives it only about 3 feet between the entrance to the pool and where the glass is. And in the show, the chairs would have been in that area. So I'm going to take a minute to go back and figure this all out at some point, but it's really crazy how television gives you such a different perspective because that place up there was much, much, much smaller than it appeared on television. And, it went around the entirety basically of the hotel. It was almost a 360-degree view of Hollywood. And you can see a picture of the Hollywood sign on my Instagram if you want to do that. I have a couple of shots from up there during the day. It was a really pretty day. I hung out there for a little while, took some photos, took a video, and then I went back to my room to, chill out and get ready for my dinner with David. I may or may not have mentioned that I had some other friends slash family that were in town for the weekend as well. We were supposed to get together, but we didn't. So on Sunday morning, they let me know that, they had maybe had too much fun on Friday night and ended up staying in the hotel on Saturday until their plans came up because they were a little hungover. And so we ended up not connecting, but they sent me a picture of their sandwiches because they had gone to something about her on their way back home, and, leaving Hollywood. And it reminded me that I wanted to go to something about her. I knew it was part of my plan, but I guess I had just forgotten. And I think I forgot because I thought they were closed on Sundays. So I looked, and yes, they did change their hours. They are now open on Sundays, and I think it's just Mondays and Tuesdays that they're now closed. So maybe they've extended their hours a little bit. But anyhow, the girls were bragging on how delicious the sandwiches were, and I knew that I had a while to go before I had gotten to my dinner. So I was kind of on the fence because I know that they're really big sandwiches, and I didn't have a refrigerator, and if I ordered one, then I wasn't going to eat it all, and I didn't want to spoil my dinner with David. But nonetheless, I went on and I ordered a sandwich from Uber Eats. Yes, something about her will send you a sandwich to your hotel from Uber Eats. So if you're ever nearby, but you're not able to get there, not all of the sandwiches would travel well. Make sure you look at the descriptions. But I ordered the Cameron, and that one did fine. One of my favorite things about staying in hotels is the blackout blinds. And I decided I was going to black the whole room out and turn on the show and get under the covers. And I fell asleep. You guys, I had a 45-minute nap, the kind of deep sleep that you only have every now and then. It was amazing. I woke up and decided that I was going to eat my sandwich. So let me tell you about the Cameron. It is so something about her, for those of you who don't know, is a sandwich shop that was opened up by Katie Maloney and Ariana Maddox, formerly of Vanderpump Rules. And it's a cute little sandwich shop that their focus was to do gourmet sandwiches and do them really well. And I thought, that's kind of a big ask, but they don't disappoint. The sandwich was delicious. Okay, so here's the description of the Cameron. The Cameron has salami, capicola, mortadella, smoked provolone, roasted red peppers, sun-dried tomatoes, banana peppers, red onion, fresh basil, Italian spices, pesto aioli, and salt and pepper on a focaccia. It doesn't say so, but it also has um, arugula is what they use in place of like a romaine or whatever kind of a lettuce you'd normally put in your sandwich. Honestly, no sandwich has any business tasting as delicious as this sandwich did. I, first of all, am not a huge sandwich person, and I can do a good Italian sub every now and then, but that's not usually what I order. This sandwich is none of those things. It's not really an Italian sub, and it doesn't even, it was just the ingredients together were so harmonious, and like the bitterness of the arugula with the creaminess of the pesto, the fact that they used red bell peppers and sun-dried tomatoes. I mean, geez Louise, it was so good. I looked at it originally and I was like, there's not very much meat and cheese in this. You don't even need a ton of meat and cheese. If it had more meat and cheese, the flavors would probably overtake all of the other ingredients. And you can tell that what ingredients they do use are very high quality. Now, you can't make any adjustments because I understand that the sandwiches are all made in the morning. So you can't ask for like no tomato or no aioli or any of that kind of stuff. But you don't really need to. If you're looking for a good gourmet sandwich at Something About Her, the Cameron is a good start. And I know I probably shouldn't say this, but if there is any truth to the fact that Chef Penny curated this entire menu, I could understand why she wants um some credit and some proprietary rights to it because it's pretty special. And if this is any indication of what some of these other sandwiches taste like, I could understand why she wants people to give her credit because it was pretty damn good. Okay, so I ate half of my sandwich. I was really sad that I wasn't going to be able to save the other half. And then I got up to make an espresso because the little machine in the room was really cute. You could do uh, a regular coffee in the pod, or you could do a little espresso pod. And they had a cute little espresso cup in the room, and I was getting ready to, get ready for dinner, and I wanted to have a little quick shot. So when I went to go make my espresso, I noticed that I had missed a drawer that opened up into a refrigerator. So yay, I was able to save my sandwich and bring it home with me. And I had it the second half at home the next day. And you guys, it was just as good. It was just as good. It held up just fine. So that's my review on Something About Her via Uber Eats anyway. I intend to go back and eat a sandwich there. I wouldn't put it past me to jump in the car on any given afternoon just to go down to Hollywood and have a sandwich at Something About Her. They really were that good. So let's move on to talk about what everybody has been waiting for. I have heard there's a lot of anticipation for this part of the podcast, and that's my dinner with David Yontef of Behind the Velvet Rope. If you listen to his podcast, you know David's a fabulous gal, and I just love her. We had a lovely dinner, but first, let me go back and tell you a little bit about how we got there. So, I originally started listening to the Sarah Fraser show. You guys may be familiar with it. She has a gossip, like reality TV, pop culture podcast, and she's been around for a long time. She's got a very successful show, and I'm a big fan. So, I'd listened for years, and from time to time, she podcasts with David a couple of times a week. So, I started, following David's podcast as a result of that. And from time to time would DM him and he would, respond or like or what have you. But that's as far as it went. And then when I got this idea to do my own podcast, I had heard that that he does podcast consulting and then just like consulting in general. He owned his own business. He was very successful in the like human resources area. And he's also an attorney, even though he doesn't practice. So I thought, why not? Let me see what this guy has to say, what I can learn from spending a little bit of time with him talking about podcasting. So I booked a session with him and we met on Zoom and we talked podcasting and all of that. And I did get some good information. But the big takeaway was that we really hit it off. And by the end of the conversation, I was thinking like I'm the female version of David when it comes to a lot of things. Obviously, not completely and exactly, but we were really like-minded and we just got along. So he has an apartment in New York and a condo in the Hamptons and an apartment in Hollywood. And during the time that we chatted, he was in the Hamptons getting ready to go to New York. So I just mentioned, hey, when you come back to Hollywood, let me know. We'll have dinner, get to know each other a little better. And he said yes, but you know how things go. I just thought, okay, he's just giving me that canned answer. And, who knows? Well, within 30 minutes of getting done with our Zoom, he did DM me and he told me the dates that he expected to be back in LA. So I thought, maybe he's serious. Anyhow, we kept in touch ever since then. And a couple of weeks later, he said, "Hey, I'm going to be back in Hollywood next week. Let's get together." And I just so happened to have been talking to Sarah and Holly about the same time, and it turned out that it was going to be the same weekend they were going to be there. So I thought, cool, two birds, one stone, a fun weekend in West Hollywood for me. And I get to meet two people that, were friends in my head and I'd been listening to for a while. And David and I had kind of already forged the beginnings of a friendship, at least, via social media. And so we made the plan for the date that we were going to meet, and I asked him for a hotel recommendation. David doesn't drive, so he either walks or Ubers everywhere he goes. So I wanted to make sure that I was in a location that was convenient for he and I to meet, but more importantly, convenient to what I was going to be doing that weekend. And he recommended the Godfrey Hotel. So that's how I heard about the Godfrey, and I didn't know until after I booked it that that was the same rooftop hotel where the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills fashion show for Sutton had just aired. So that was kind of a cool little bonus. So I get ready for dinner, and we're going to meet in the lobby at 5 o'clock and then Uber over to the restaurant together. And I had asked him to make the reservations because I don't know where the hell I'm going in Hollywood. I knew that David had to record after our dinner, so I knew we weren't going to go anywhere after, which made it safe for me to wear heels, LOL. And I met him down in the lobby. He is notorious for being on time. And it was funny because he said it really drives him crazy when people are late and they don't say anything. So at like 4:58, I got a text saying that he was running 2 minutes late and he would be there in 4 minutes. And I thought that was really funny and very typical of what David says he does. So he shows up exactly 2 minutes late, and we meet in the lobby. He's really personable, gives me a big old hug, and comes in a little bit harried, saying that he was really tired and, he didn't know why. But to be fair, he had gotten back from New York not that long before, so he was kind of still operating on East Coast time. And it was, 5 o'clock, which made it 8 o'clock in his body. Anyway, we jumped on an Uber again. The Uber came within a couple of seconds, and he had made reservations at Jar Hollywood, so that's where we headed for dinner. I gave him kind of a hard time, first off, because I told him, well, I'm now know for sure that you didn't listen to my podcast, because if you had, you'd have made reservations at Drake's, because that's what I mentioned during the podcast when I told people that I was heading out to Hollywood for the weekend. And he kind of chuckled and he said, "I told you I really don't listen to anybody's podcast." And, he proved that he's not a liar. It was so funny though. He said, "Oh my God, I was going to make reservations at Drake's." No kidding, I was going to make reservations at Drake's, but the reason I didn't was because it opened a little bit later and I knew we wanted to have an early dinner. So he said, "We'll do Drake's next time." And, we went on with the rest of our conversation. So we started talking about, I asked him about whether or not he really uses the products that he advertises, in particular, the One Skin skincare product that he's advertising now, because he had good skin, and that's why I was asking. He said he in fact does use One Skin, and as a matter of fact is pretty much only using One Skin, and that he loved it and he swore by it. So there you go. That's the answer, at least in this case, with regards to whether podcasters use the products that they're advertising. So we talked about, what you do for skincare, and he talked a little bit about injectables and fillers, and he said that it's all he does. He's never had anything else done, and that it had been, in fact, a long time since he had had any fillers even, but that he was getting ready to have Botox in the next week. So, and that he usually has his Botox when he's in Hollywood. So, We got to the restaurant and it wasn't a very far ride. We walked in, we were the first ones there. We had a 5:30 reservation, and I think that's the time they open. The place is an open restaurant with a closed kitchen. It was very bright, very light palette. So we got a nice little table in the corner, and we ordered some water and then decided that we were going to look at the cocktail menu. Now, remember, I had a hankering for a martini, so I kind of knew that's what I was going to have regardless. And I know David and I are both martini drinkers, so he ordered a very clean martini, which they are using some new vodka that we decided to go ahead and try, and it wasn't bad. Um, it was a little bit, I would say, lower end than like a Belvedere, but a little bit nicer than a Tito's. So anyhow, he ordered a clean martini with just vodka and a lemon twist, and I ordered the jar naughty martini, which came dirty and with the blue cheese stuffed olive. The drink was delicious and the conversation was pretty good too. So let's get into it. I'll tell you a little bit about what we talked about. First, we talked about Melissa Rivers. He's really good friends with Melissa Rivers. She's been on his podcast a whole bunch of times. And I had noticed the night before that Melissa Rivers got married. So my first question was, were you there? And he said, no, it's a little strange, but she didn't really have anything where she really invited people. It was just her assistant and a couple of other people. So no, he wasn't there. And he thought it was a little odd that she didn't have anything bigger. But, who are we to tell people how to get married? So there you go. Congratulations, Melissa Rivers. And then we talked a little bit about his favorite and my favorite, Joan Rivers, RIP Joan Rivers. Listen, I'm not starstruck, but if I would have met Joan Rivers, that would have been a moment for me. I loved her and I just thought that she was way ahead of her time. So, how lucky are you, David, to have actually gotten to know her and have a relationship with her? We talked about her a little bit, not that much. Mostly, I was just kind of fanning out over the fact that he did know her and, you know, uh, didn't want to get in too deep with any stories. So I really didn't want to lead the conversation, and it was never my intention to go out and talk Bravo for 2 hours with David or to try to pump him for any information. I honestly didn't have an agenda. I just wanted to, have a nice dinner with a friend and have a couple of martinis. And honestly, that's kind of how I set out. But he was, willing to talk about everything and anything. And he kind of led the conversation and just started talking about certain things. The first thing he said was, I love Luann, but I don't look forward to spending time with her during the summer all the time. And I thought, that's weird. Dude, invite me on her boat. I'll put up with her to hang out in the Hamptons. It looks beautiful. Of course, I'm just kidding. But, I didn't say anything. And then I doubled back and I said, wait a second. What do you mean about Luann? He said, she's a good friend. I really do love her, but she is kind of difficult. And you guys, I pushed him a little bit and I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, for example, she's a little hard to handle one-on-one. She could be kind of embarrassing. He said, for example, if we were sitting here at this table, she would have found something to complain about already, whether it would have been that the glasses weren't in the right place or that they weren't bringing us water fast enough or something. So there you have it. There's a little tea on the Countess. And then we talked a little bit about Teddi Mellencamp. And now, to be fair, Teddi Mellencamp and David Yontef don't have a great history. Their podcasts, I don't know like the details, but they have had moments of feuding, and therefore, David was, I think, blocked by Teddi and lovingly and jokingly refers to her on his podcast as Theodora Melonball. But all of that has stopped in light of the recent news of Teddy's, health situation with the brain tumors and the cancer and everything she's going through. And so we talked about her more with how it relates to our personal experiences. And we talked about how people just don't get it. And, they're saying just some stupid shit on the internet about, giving unsolicited advice and things that they think she should and shouldn't be doing. Listen, if you have had any close interaction with a family member or a close friend or a significant other who has had a serious case of cancer, it's no joke. And the last thing that you should do is be judging how the patient is living their life. So David and I kind of got into a rant about that because we both have had close family members that have battled serious cancer. And unless you know, what Teddi is going through is way more serious than she's alluding to, than anybody is taking away. When cancer metastasizes, you guys, it's bad. And just the fact that this woman is out there still living her life and wanting to ride horses and, date and all those things, you guys, if you have an opinion, fuck off. Unless you've been there, you don't know. So that's kind of what our conversation was about, because I asked him how cancer had touched his life, and he said he had lost his father to cancer, pancreatic cancer, which really sucks. That's a bad one, guys. And so, you know, it's hard to watch, and if and you don't judge. And so that's why he has, completely turned around how he talks about Teddi, because we know, and therefore we let live. So that's where the conversation went with regards to Teddi Mellencamp. And, I just listened to her podcast this morning with Erica Jane, and you can tell that there are still some affects from the treatment that she's going through. So I personally am humbled by her strength and her resilience. And you can tell her friend group is just so inspired by the fact that she just has a great attitude and gets up and keeps on going. So I'm still 1000% behind you, Teddi. You do you, boo. And I cannot wait to see you on the other end of this. You're still in my prayers, girl. At this point, David and I are deep into our conversation and enjoying ourselves, and the server keeps coming over and like kind of embarrassingly interrupting and asking if we're ready or if we're okay. You guys, we'd been there maybe 20 minutes. We hadn't even looked at our menu. We were that enthralled in our conversation and enjoying our cocktail. And so I think we were just kind of both unwinding and settling in and getting to know each other. And, we hadn't thought about food, even though I was hungry. So we moved on. I remembered that he had gone to see Morgan Wade in concert, more as like investigative work for the podcast, I'm guessing, and less because he was a Morgan Wade fan, because he said he didn't stay. He really kind of just went for the meetup. And when I asked him, how she was, he said that she was very nice and that he didn't have any tea because he didn't see Kyle or anything like that. But he did mention that Morgan Wade was in Amsterdam, and coincidentally, so was Kyle Richards. I asked him what he really thinks about that. And he didn't say anything definitively, but I think we both agree that there's a lot more to that. And we're both pretty annoyed that Kyle is dragging this on so long. So David and I need you to bring it home, Kyle. Tell us what the hell's going on with you and Morgan and why you're in Amsterdam all over the world following her if you're just friends. I'm a live and let live kind of a person, but the fact that This has become the non-story storyline is what's kind of annoying me and why I'm digging my heels in on wanting to have an answer on this. Normally, I really wouldn't care who Kyle Richards is in love with or not in love with, but you know, this is kind of getting to the point of being annoying. So I now want to know. People want to know. David had run into Kim Richards, I had heard on the podcast, and he told Sarah Fraser about the interaction. And um, he thought that Kim was in a good place at the time and didn't look like, maybe didn't look great, but didn't look like she was certainly on a bender or anything like that. So naturally, after talking about Morgan and Kyle and Kim, I asked about Kathy Hilton. And I said, now I know you've been to a party of Kathy Hilton's or that you've met her. And he reminded me that it was at Sutton's fashion show. He and Sarah had gone to the party and he did meet her. And I asked him what his impression of her was. And I'm going to tell you what my impression is. And then, given that I'm a podcaster who's in this space, I'm going to tread a little bit lightly. So, my impression of Kathy Hilton, never having met her, only watching her on TV, is that she is very smart, very calculating, and does nothing by accident, and has a lot of power and is not afraid to wield it. I'm not going to tell you exactly what David said, but let's just say that my impression isn't far off. So, Kathy Hilton, I love you. And if you ever want to invite me to any of your parties, I'll say nothing but nice things, I promise. You guys, like that's ever going to happen. In thinking about it, though, it's just so odd to me that those three are sisters. They're so completely and totally different. And don't think I had ever really thought about it before until after my conversation with David last weekend. So the waiter came over one too many times, and we finally felt the need to maybe order something. And we both ordered the baby gem Caesar salad, and those are $13 a piece, just in case you're wondering. Very, very fresh, very lovely, a delicious classic Caesar. Um, I we're chatting, but I couldn't help but notice that David ate his salad in like 9.9 seconds. So normally I would never have made a comment like this, but it was really literally mind-blowing how fast he ate it. And I said, geez, Louise, I didn't realize you ate so fast. And he caught himself and started laughing. And he said, you know what? You're right. I don't normally eat that fast. But you're right. I really ate that fast. And it's not even because I'm hungry. I don't even know what it is. And I joked that it was because I made him nervous and we both laughed it off, yada, yada. So we order a second martini, and then I asked him about the night before. You guys, I was having dinner. I know I say I'm not starstruck, but this is kind of cool. I was having dinner with the guy who the night before had had dinner with RuPaul. Now, I love RuPaul. Fabulous, amazing. How cool was that? I asked about that. He said he had a really good time. And from the change in the look on his face, you could tell he fangirls out a little bit over RuPaul too. I won't press for anything that I'm not given. And so we just moved on to the next subject. But you could tell that he had a little gleam in his eye and he had a really good time. Nothing crazy, nothing romantic, just a nice evening out at an event with RuPaul. Oh my. I asked him real quickly about Andy Cohen and what he thinks about the rumors that Andy is going to leave. And he agrees with me. He thinks that that's just clickbait and that the announcement that we're supposed to hear in April is probably going to be, you know, uh, nothing to write home about or something that they've been blowing out of proportion. So there you have it on that. when David and I spoke the first time, I asked him about having guests on the show, and he said, my podcasts that do best are really the ones where I'm just talking and bringing people up to speed on the gossip. So having a guest is nice, but I don't think it's paramount to a successful show. So we spent a little bit of time talking about guests, and he was telling me about some of his upcoming guests. He had told me in advance about the Flava Flav show and the fact that he somehow has a connection to the Masked Singer and is interviewing all of the people who are getting voted off as they are getting voted off, and that he was supposed to have Sheena, but Sheena wanted to exclusively do her announcement on her own podcast. And so, that's neither here nor there, but that's why she wasn't on his show. He did have Oscar de la Hoya on, and we talked a little bit about Oscar. Now, I told him that I had heard Oscar de la Hoya was kind of a jackass, and he didn't disagree, you guys. He said that he was really preoccupied with how things were going to come across. He wanted to make sure that there were certain angles. And, David pointed out that it was just a Zoom and that basically they had control of that. And anyway, listen to the podcast and, decide for yourself what you think of Oscar de la Hoya. I know now from more than one person that, I'm okay if I never meet him. Might have been a good boxer, but I don't know about the rest. Anyway, we also talked about a certain real estate reality TV personality that he interviews that walks in and announces, "Sorry, I'm an hour late. I'm drunk." And he said, "I purposely did not edit it out. I'm quite certain he or she was very coked out." So again, do your own private detecting and maybe listen to David's podcast and see if you could find out who that is. I know who it is, and I'll be listening. That was a good bit of tea. Like, who shows up to record a podcast an hour late in a rented studio and, before the handshake announces, "Sorry, I'm late, I'm drunk." Really? I don't know if I want to interview guests. That scared me a little bit. Of course, we talked about Sarah Fraser. I told him, that I really liked her and that I kind of wish she could have joined us for dinner. And he said that he thought Sarah was going through something. And, I said that I could tell that she was acting a little differently on the podcast lately. Well, you guys, he's a good friend because he didn't say anything. And the next day, when I was driving home, I listened to Sarah's podcast, and it was heartbreaking news. She announced that she had just had her fourth miscarriage. And so I'm quite certain that's what David was referring to. And that was really sad. So she's on a journey to have more children. And that had just happened. And, David more than likely knew it. So Sarah, I'm wishing you all my best. And I really hope that you get the children that you want, and that that there are people out here who are rooting for you and praying for you. So, that conversation led to us taking a little bit of a break and finally deciding that we might want to order dinner. I think we're a good hour, maybe hour and 15 minutes into dinner, and we had just had our salad, and by now the place is filling up a little bit. So the 32 waiters were not all lined up staring at us waiting to serve us. They were otherwise engaged by this point. So that was good. So, what did we eat for dinner? Well, I couldn't decide. They're supposedly known for their pot roast, but I didn't want to do that. So we both ended up ordering the skirt steak, $45, and it was good. It had a nice crust on it, but I think they might have done like a reverse sear, because it was a little, mine was medium rare, and it wasn't as hot as I would have thought it would have been in the middle. So I ate about half of it. David ate all of it. They were delicious. We ordered a couple of sauces, the lobster béarnaise and the creamy horseradish. I like the creamy horseradish better than the lobster béarnaise, but they were both pretty good. And then we ordered the cream spinach on the side at $13. By the way, in case you're wondering, the martinis were $18 each. And just to give you an idea of what the price point is over at Jar. So we had our dinner. He ate his steak fast too, you guys, and I did make a comment about that. So maybe he just eats faster than he thinks. At first, when he first ate the salad, I thought, gosh, is he trying to get away from me? Is that what this is? But he literally made a comment later that he had canceled his podcast recording because he was having a nice time so we could spend more time together at dinner. So that wasn't it. So the one other very interesting thing, in fact, I just text David yesterday and said, hey, remember we talked about this on Sunday? And he texts back, yeah, LOL. Um, we talked about Garcelle's probably leaving Housewives of Beverly Hills. And then in Bravo News, Garcelle walks off during the reunion and quits The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. And if we thought it was speculation, she follows it up with a very detailed explanation on Instagram the next morning. So, David, we don't have a crystal ball, but we're pretty good at this. Honestly, I'm glad she left. I was starting to change my opinion of her, and I think very highly of her. So I think she kind of ran it for all it's worth, at least at this point. And I'm glad that, she's not coming back. We need a shakeup in Beverly Hills, and we'll talk about that on the regular episode this week when I recap Beverly Hills, and we'll cover the finale. Anyway, to wrap up my dinner with David and thereby my weekend in WeHo, we went on to talk about, the fact that he has a fabulous apartment overlooking the Hollywood sign. And we talked about the fact that he has a lovely condo in the Hamptons and that he has an apartment in New York that is, faces Central Park that he doesn't let anybody go to because of how completely and totally compulsive he is with regards to that particular home of his. He says he paid a professional a lot of money to decorate it and he just loves it. It's pristine and he thinks it'll probably be 6 years before anybody is allowed to sit on the couch. So that was funny. And he knows how crazy that sounds too, by the way. He invited me to come hang out in New York and said he'd take me to some fun places. And then he said, and I suppose if you come to the Hamptons, you'll have to stay with me because there's nowhere really to stay. And I told him that is really what is on my bucket list. I love New York and I'll definitely go back to New York and take him up on his offer if I'm there. But really, it's the Hamptons that I would love to visit. Uh, I asked him what he would do if he stopped podcasting tomorrow. And he said that he would make his primary home the Hamptons home and then he would probably travel every few weeks and then go to his other houses. But for the most part, guy after my own heart, he would hide from society and just, sit home, eat fabulous food, and watch reality TV and hang out with his family and friends whenever he wanted to, and then hide the rest of the time. I knew there was a reason that I liked you, David. So, the rest of the dinner, we just kind of chatted about, personal things and life in general. And then we talked about what we'll do next time we get together. He said that he wants us to go to Drake's and that he hadn't been to Musso and Frank's, so we want to go there as well. So I see a blooming friendship with my friend, Mr. Yontef. Fabulous gal. I had so much fun. We got back to the hotel. We chatted for 10 seconds in the lobby. We took a picture together. He gave me a big hug, blew me kisses, and we agreed to chat, via text and stay in touch and get together again soon. So there you have it, you guys. That was my dinner with David Yontef. And essentially my weekend in WeHo. I went back to the hotel. They had like a Afro beats thing going on till 10 o'clock. It wasn't nearly as loud, so I wasn't hearing it at all. and I had a nice cup of tea. The next day, I went down and had a cup of coffee, and the host was a cool cat named Jack, who is working on becoming a voiceover actor. We had a nice conversation, and I, got in my car and I came home. So that was my weekend in West Hollywood, and I had a really good time. I hope you guys had fun listening to, my adventures while I was out there. And I hope that you'll join me for the regular episode this week. We'll cover Beverly Hills, of course, and anything else that, comes up between now and then. I'm really excited to tell you about another cooking class that I went to. This was a beef Wellington class. And I also had a meeting with Jasmine of the Innocence Center. If you're not following them, follow them on Instagram. It is a organization that focuses on getting wrongly convicted people released from prison. And they were featured on The Real Housewives of Orange County. Emily Simpson is an ambassador for the San Diego division. And I'm working with Jasmine to try to bring a fundraiser to Temecula so that we too can be a part of the solution in, supporting this cause, and also maybe even a viewing party if we're lucky. So stay tuned for all of that as that develops. And again, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know that you have a lot of choices and I really appreciate it. Bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Living on the Verge podcast. If you like what you've heard, I'd love 5 stars, and don't forget to subscribe. If you have any hot tea or blind items, I promise you can stay anonymous if you like, or if you want your name mentioned, I can do that too. Just email us at livingonthevergepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach us on Instagram at Living on the Verge Podcast. So again, thank you. Come back again and join me for the next episode and see what I can get myself into, and we can all be living on the verge together. Have a nice day.